What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Call to Act podcast. If this is the first time that you're listening, thank you so very much for tuning in. I'm very excited today. We have a very special guest with us. We have Mr. Paul McCusker. Paul, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm all right. It's good to see you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to read a little bit of your bio before we get started. So he is a writer, right, and an author. He's written many books, written books on C.S. Lewis, Screwtape Letters, and Mere Christianity. Let's see, what else? You have a pretty lengthy bio here. You're a busy man.
Yeah, I wouldn't read it if I were you. If I were in your position, I wouldn't go there.
You wouldn't read it?
I do a bit of writing. That's probably all that you need to say.
A bit of writing. Well, I'll say the thing that stuck out to me the most, because it's what I grew up listening to, is Adventures in Odyssey. So okay. Paul McCusker was a writer for Adventures in Odyssey, is it the longest running radio program?
Well, I think so. In America, I don't think there's anything now we've been on since 1987.
Yeah.
And I know that there is a show in England. I think it's 10 or 15 minute audio drama called The Archers or something like that. But it's been on longer, but yeah. I'm not even sure that they're still doing it. So I guess for our purposes, we can say that we are.
Yeah, there we go. Still going strong since 1987, right?
Yep.
There we go. All right. So before we get into it, because I want to get into a little bit of just your background, maybe your upbringing, things of that nature. But before we do that, we do something on here anytime we have a guest called the Big Three. So the Big Three is just three random, goofy questions, hopefully ones that you've never had on an interview before. So you ready?
Okay.
All right. So question number one. Paul McCusker, you are the captain of your bowling team. What is your bowling team's name?
The Holy Rollers. I don't know.
Holy Rollers. There you go.
I don't know. That almost sounds cliche. I'm sure it's been used. Holy Rollers.
I like it. My wife's the one that came up with that one. She asked me, she said, what would you say? I said, I don't know, maybe like the Pinheads or something. I don't know. All right, so Holy Rollers, I like it. It's okay. So question number two. How long have you and your wife been married? This is not the question, but how long have y'all been married?
We've been married 34 years.
34 years. Okay, so this is going to be interesting.
We got married the year I actually went to work for Adventures in Odyssey. So
oh, wow.
That was January of 88. I was writing for it before, but we got married. Yeah. I started to focus on the family in January. We got married in February.
Wow. Well, congratulations. That's an accomplishment for sure. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is question number two. So this one comes from my wife also. What fruit does your spouse most remind you of?
The first thing that came to mind was grapes.
Grapes?
Sure. I think I know why I thought of grapes.
Yeah. Can you share that?
There's a joke between us that when at various times, and it's from an old movie where a character, it's like a Roman setting for a movie where a character actually says, "Peel me a grape." And it's one of those complete self-indulgent sort of luxury, like, how do you get caviar stains out of your mink sofa? I mean, that's a level that none of us know. And so peel me a grape makes me think of her, which makes me think then of the fruit when you ask that question.
Well, there you go. There you go. It's good you didn't say like lemon or something like that. That might get you in trouble.
Lemon or pineapple. I know. I for some reason I thought of pineapple, but then I thought,
you got to be careful.
Not quite right.
Yeah, you got to be careful, especially if they hear it. Okay, so question number three.
If I said watermelon, then I'd really be in trouble.
Yeah, my wife asked me, she said, well, what fruit would you say that I am? And I said, I love you very much. Let's just not go there.
Yeah. Why even ask me these questions?
Exactly. Yeah, they're just setting us up to fail. All right, so question number three. If you had to choose one, would you rather have to skip everywhere you go or walk backwards?
Skip. Yeah, I think as an adult, there are days when I would just love to skip anyway, just to see what people would do.
Yeah.
Things you do as a kid that you just don't do as an adult and how weird it is. But skipping, there are advantages because you're going to get to where you're going faster.
Sure.
And there's a certain childlike enthusiasm that goes with skipping, whereas walking backwards, it just strikes me as just being confused.
And all the time people are going to be constantly trying to stick out their leg, trying to trip you up.
Well, there would be that too.
Backwards.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody wants to be cruel, yeah, they could do that.
That's right.
Yeah, no, skipping definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So that's the big three, just kind of a little warm up. We don't take ourselves too seriously, right? So, so I want to go back to your youth. Were you always someone who was interested in writing?
Yeah, actually, as I think at the point when I could write, actually write letters and do things, I was interested in writing. But I think even before that, I was drawing. I was definitely this creative urge, whatever it was, goes back way back. I think it's always been an interest for me. Solidifying into something that I actually thought I could do as a career came much later, obviously. I mean, you always think when you're 5, 6, 7 years old, I didn't even think it was possible for me to be a writer. I think I thought maybe I could be a cartoonist, but there's a point where you're thinking, oh, it's also like saying I want to be an astronaut or a fireman, things that sometimes kids will say. But it stayed with me. It never varied in terms of a level of interest in what I would do with free time or whatever.
I guess that would have to be the case if you take it back to your youth, because you take that out to as long as Adventures in Odyssey has been going, just the ability to be able to come up with new storylines and new characters for 30 plus years.
And I think, I think that's part of the brilliance of Odyssey. Is the nature of it. I mean, there are some show concepts that I think you within a certain amount of time that it's going to exhaust itself. And you've seen them. There have been shows on TV or wherever that went on a lot longer than they really should have. But with Odyssey, the funny thing about Odyssey is even when there were times when we thought, oh, I think we're done, I think it's time to stop, then usually something would happen that would make us go, well, wait a minute, hang on, I think we should just do this. And then suddenly it's going again. And I think the breadth of Odyssey, because it's about these characters who are very expansive, I want to say. The town of Odyssey, the characters in Odyssey, everything, because it's about life to a great degree, is easily expanded upon. And then the stories come with that. And so we could keep it going after all these years.
And I think that's one thing that's interesting too, because if you bought a set of however many episodes, 6 or 8 episodes, there could be a couple that go together, but then there could be 2 or 3 in a row where it's completely new family, different, characters that have nothing to do with characters on the other episodes on there. So I think it's
and we often did it sort of the way we kind of described it was, where does the camera go? In other words, the camera is on this family or on these situations, and we might do sometimes unintentional, sometimes intentional story arcs where we're following a particular family or a particular kid or situation. And other times there's sort of random shows, all centered generally within Odyssey and around Wit's End or whatever, but it's all there. But it's whatever struck us as a good idea, something that would be meaningful and entertaining at the same time. I mean, we rarely did things just to be entertaining, though we always wanted to be entertaining. There was always something else going on within the story that we were hoping would be meaningful to listeners.
And I know. That's big, because I grew up in a Christian home, and there's not a whole lot of options out there, especially nowadays, for if you're trying to look for positive media for your kids. So that's one thing I'm appreciative to the show, to you, to all you guys for, putting forth the effort to putting out something like that is watchable or, listenable, and something that you're comfortable with putting on for your kids, and then leaving the room. You don't have to worry about, the stuff they're listening to. You know what I mean? Well,
we hope not. I think if we ever came up against an edge, our fans, our listeners usually let us know.
I'm sure.
That we got a little close to the edge on a certain storyline or something like that. But I think our sensibilities protected us a lot of times, even when our creativity wanted to go. certain places. Let's do this. Let's try that. But there was always a prevailing sensibility that said, no, but wait a minute. I mean, we can try that, but we've got to do it in a way that will be meaningful for the kids, but also for the parents, so that we're not at odds with parents.
Working with them.
Yeah, that we're, if not working overtly for them, but certainly working with them.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the chemistry all you guys had together, to where it's one like-mindedness, to where you know what the goal is. You're not fighting against each other, and you're able to kind of, like you said, if it kind of gets off the rails a little bit, each of you are there to kind of pull the other back.
Well, now don't get me wrong, we did have a lot of fights, but it was usually trying to sort it out, because our team has always been very diverse creatively. I mean, all of us have at various times, so we've had various writers come and go, and technically speaking, just in full disclosure, I'm not working actively with Odyssey right now. I left 7 years ago, but I still occasionally freelance for them. I still occasionally write for them. I sometimes consult about different things that they're doing. But over the years, I mean, with 30 plus years of shows and the writers that have come through, every one of us we have different backgrounds, different life experiences that occasionally would collide in terms of the direction of the show or what we were doing. But I always thought ultimately it was in the healthiest way. Ultimately, it benefited the show. Yeah. Even when we're behind the scenes going, well, no, you can't do that. And well, yeah, why can't I? And then we're wrestling back and forth about what it is and why and the wherefores. And inevitably, I think it made the show stronger, because if we could get that kind of agreement and consensus in it, it ultimately meant for a good show, a good episode, or whatever it is we were working on. Yeah.
Yeah. And just being comfortable enough to have those kind of arguments and not have people storm off, or, I quit, or this or that, you know what I mean? Being able to have those healthy arguments, that's very important. So was it always writing and reading the kind of art that you were into, or was it other music, anything like that?
Well, coming at it sideways, music definitely. And I still listen to, I love music and listen to a lot of music. And the music, strangely enough, can influence my writing, even though my writing doesn't appear to have anything to do with music. Yeah. But that, to me, is the nature of inspiration, that you can be inspired to do something. And this is why, like with writers, when they're asking about that, I would say, well, don't limit yourself. If you're writing audio dramas, don't just listen to audio dramas. My inspiration can come from TV shows, movies. In fact, Phil Lawler and I talked about this recently. We were just saying how we'd come together and it's like, oh, this weekend I saw this on TV, or I heard this, or I was listening to this music, and we kind of throw it into the mix as an idea, not directly, but indirectly. Wouldn't it be cool if we could do X, Y, or Z, or whatever it was, because we were inspired by a play or a movie or TV show or a song or an orchestral piece or something like that. So the influences come from wherever we could get them. The inspiration, wherever we could get inspiration. And to me, I still do. I mean, there's no stopping that. I'm always looking for inspiration from wherever I can find it. And it really does come from unlikely sources, And I don't limit it in terms of what I enjoy, and then what might inspire me to say, oh, wow, look how they did that. I wonder if there's a way for us to do something like that in Odyssey, in what we're doing.
Yeah, try to convert it over. Did you play? Any instruments? I asked.
No.
Well, let me cut you off. I asked because I spoke to a friend of yours not too long ago, Miss Katie Lee.
Oh yeah,
and she told me to ask you something about your drums.
Drum. Oh well, there's well the end. It's kind of a family joke. That what happened is, and the truth is, whenever I got an instrument, like I think my mom wished that I would learn keyboards, but I didn't have the patience. There was a part of me that just felt like my fingers should hit the right keys and everything should work the way it should.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the patience to learn it properly. And I remember they bought me a guitar and to learn guitar. And my oldest brother took the guitar and he learned how to play guitar. And then what Katie's referring to, and I'm sure it must be that, where I was joking about the fact that one Christmas it was a cheesy drum kit, but cheesy drums.
Yeah.
And really, all I did was bang around on them. I mean, the actual learning how to play drums. And my brother kind of did this, oh, you're driving me crazy. And granted, I'm like 10 years old and he's 12, whatever it is. But it's like, just stop banging around on this. Do something. And then he learned how to play drums.
Oh, gosh.
So the running joke is I became a writer because it was the one thing that I got a typewriter and he didn't take the typewriter away from me.
Oh, I gotcha.
And so it was the one thing that I could do that didn't put me in any sort of competition with anybody else. Though actually my oldest brother is a writer. He can and does write and has had various jobs over his careers doing writing. I think he's a good writer. He doesn't write the sort of things that I do, but he does write and he likes to write. He likes to be creative. But yeah, that's what Katie would be talking about. I asked everything I tried to learn musically, my brother took. So I actually did sing. I mean, when I was younger, and we actually had the obligatory Christian rock band kind of thing. Yeah. And I was one of 3 singers in that. And I made a very wise decision that I learned that being able to hold a note isn't the same as being a good singer.
Yeah.
And that I would probably be better off writing than singing.
Did y'all do any shows or anything?
Oh, we performed. I mean, we did youth musicals as part of my church. Yeah. And then like the band, the group, my brother being a guitarist, and then we had other guys, we all came together to form this band that we called Cornerstone. And I mean, this is back in late 70s. Yeah. You know, before you were born, before anybody was born. It's amazing anybody was even alive then. But we did it, I think, for a couple of years. We would perform at churches and perform in different places. And I mean, we weren't bad. And but I wouldn't say that. I think at the point when I made the decision that I shouldn't be singing, that I should be writing and be more behind the scenes. Did you write
did y'all perform your own? Did y'all perform your own songs, or was it just?
We did some of the popular contemporary Christian music songs, but we did write. And I was generally the lyricist.
Yeah, that was my next question.
Even before I started writing sketches and plays and that sort of thing, I actually, if I moved on, I wanted to be a cartoonist, and then kind of moved from that into other types of writing. And then I thought, I want to be a lyricist. I want to write lyrics to songs. And I did. And I did for that. And then later on, I actually have written some lyrics to songs that were been actually recorded by professionals. Wow. And including one song co-written with Michael W. Smith. Really? But this is little known, buried in the past. But
that's what we want to hear today.
I really wanted to be a lyricist, and but I'm also an opportunist, and I don't mean in a well, I don't want to say in a malevolent sense, but I tended to write where I was being led to write, where the opportunities were. Yeah, and so honestly, I don't know which direction I could have gone. I wound up doing sketches and plays, and then that led to Adventures in Odyssey and writing audio dramas for the last 30 plus years, but also writing novels and writing other kinds of things. Yeah. Just because the opportunities were there. Yeah. And so I always followed opportunities and wrote according to the opportunities. Yeah. As opposed to, at the age of 12, I don't know that I was thinking I want to be an audio dramatist. Yeah. Which would have been crazy anyway, because there wasn't much opportunity to do that anywhere. The fact that Focus on the Family decided to do it was so against the trends of the time. We were given a hard time for even doing it. It's like this was the MTV generation. Why are you doing an audio drama
Yeah.
when everything right now is visual. And the truth is, it's because Focus on the Family was first and foremost a radio producer entity, the Focus on the Family broadcast. Radio is what we knew and what we had an entry into, as opposed to starting Odyssey as a video thing. That came later. The animated series came later. Yeah. So it's interesting. I just kind of followed the current in a way. Yeah. I could never give advice about careers because my whole career just doesn't follow any particular strategy.
Yeah, it just went wherever the Lord led.
Well, he
takes care.
Pretty much it. You know, I just kind of followed along, really.
Yeah. I did have a question about that. Maybe you can answer it, maybe not. The animated series, I know Whit and Connie and Eugene and those guys, but why were like Dylan and his family, why were they never in the radio series?
Well, you know, we started with the radio. And so we created the foundation of what was Adventures in Odyssey for audio. And the guys who produced, and they were on the Focus on the Family film team, but the guys who produced that were of a mind that you guys have done things with the radio that we don't think we can do as well, or if not as well, but it's we need to be more visual. We're doing animation, so we're going to have to create some things that you don't have in order to make it work for animation.
I see.
Now, that's a huge debate, and it's been a debate that's been going on for 30 years about could they, should they have, you know, whatever. And at the time, it's not like we were all brand manager specialists. You know, it's funny because a lot of people at the time would have said, no, when you create the animation, you should follow and do what you've already established with radio. But I think the argument, which was a fair one, was that the animation would have a whole new audience. It would have a different audience. Yeah. So the guys who did the animation were within their, I guess, within their authority to make changes that they thought would work for visual. And I wrote a couple of them. I mean, and again, I was being opportunistic because I had the chance to do it, and they said, "Yeah, go ahead and give it a try." And you know, for me, it was a learning curve. I thought, well, I'll do it. I wasn't a big fan of Dylan or some of the things that they did. I understood why they did it and why they changed the world of Odyssey to do what they did. But over time, if you watch the animation, especially when we moved in to some of those later episodes, we tried to introduce some of the other characters and actually tried to make the animation series a little more like the audio.
Yeah.
Because when all was said and done, we could produce more audio episodes faster than they could produce the animation.
Right.
So at least from sheer numbers, we could win.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to argue about who gets the advantage, well, arguably, we had our world. We were staying true to it. But those are hugely popular. I mean, you know, we can grumble and gripe about certain things where we had two different realities. Nowadays, of course, in the multiverse reality, you reboot, you redo. The fact that world was different from the audio doesn't seem to matter.
And it still holds up, too, because I was watching, I have 3 kids, and me and my 3-year-old were sitting on the couch the other day watching the one where Dylan and Eugene go west.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and he's the sheriff. Yeah, so they still hold up today. They kept his attention. You know,
good.
With kids nowadays, how quickly they can go from this to that at the touch of a finger. You know what I mean? So to hold his attention, that's saying something. You know?
Oh, good.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's that story. Going back to what you said about your brother with the drums and the guitar, I thought that story was going to go a different way. I have 2 boys. So when I heard there was some trouble, I thought maybe he hit you with the guitar or something like that. That's what my boys would do.
Oh no! You know, it's funny. In my family, we didn't get physical like that. We didn't. Yeah. I mean, we would roughhouse and wrestle around, but in terms of if we got angry or a fight kind of thing, I don't remember. Yeah, you know, in fact, one of these stories that I don't think I've ever told publicly, I have, but I can only think of one occasion when my oldest brother pushed me. He pushed me, and I deserved it. So I'm going to say, quickly.
Yeah.
I was being a bit of a smart mouth with him. I was kind of talking back, and all he did was push me, but I lost my balance. And I did this sort of stumbling backwards, like from the length through our kitchen all the way into what was our like pantry, this sort of side room.
Yeah.
And finally kind of fell on my rear end back in that room. And he told me later I looked so pathetic while I was sort of pinwheeling backwards. That, I think he thought, okay, I'm never going to do that again. It's too easy.
Oh, man.
And so I thought, I deserved it.
So that was the end of your illustrious fighting career right there?
Well, my family, we were 4 boys. We would roughhouse, but we just didn't do the pushing each other around or hitting each other in the heads with drumsticks or whatever. I don't know.
That's a good thing. Yeah, my boys, as soon as I get home every day from work, it's, let's fight, Dad, let's fight.
It's crazy time. Yeah.
Getting on the ground, wrestling around. Yeah, it's good stuff. But so, like I said at the beginning, you wrote a couple books, and I just found this out not too long ago about Mere Christianity, right? And what's the other Screw Tape Letters?
Right.
So what drew you to do that with C.S. Lewis?
Well, what followed on when we started the radio theater series, which was we were trying to answer the question, what happens after Odyssey? Not that Odyssey should finish, but in the sense of we knew certain kids were growing up. And so we thought, well, how can we do some older stories that are different? They're not a follow-on from Odyssey. And we created this radio theater. And one of the first things on our wish list, one which we did first, was Christmas Carol. And then we did The Life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, but we wanted to do Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out that Doug Grisham, C.S. Lewis's stepson, was a big Odyssey fan.
Wow.
And when he found out, when we approached them and said, would it be possible to get the rights to do the dramas? It took a little while for some things to happen, but when it happened, then we got the rights to do all 7 stories. And that was the introduction into the Lewis camp in that respect. And I think they were so pleased with our production that then they were keen for us to do others. And so our follow-up was, all right, well, we've done the 7 Narnias. What do we do next? What would be the obvious thing? And they said, well, if you're not going to do the science fiction novels, because there's the science fiction trilogy, or Till We Have Faces, which he had also written. The other thing would be to figure out how to dramatize Screw Tape Letters. And so that would be number 2. And so we said, okay, well, we'll try to do that and we'll figure out how to do it. And we did. And while doing that one, by the way, it became very clear that there were a lot of words and phrases that Lewis used that people just didn't know. And so that led to me writing this annotated Screw Tape Letters, where the footnotes, I don't try to explain the meaning. I just try to explain what certain words and phrases mean, and also to connect Screw Tape, to put Screw Tape in context with Lewis's other writings. So there are ideas in Screw Tape that he would later explore in Mere Christianity and other writings, and I would point to those writings. And so that's all the annotation version does. So it's still out there in print. And then the third thing, we said, well, what do we do next? And that's when they said, Mere Christianity. And I thought, well, I don't know how to dramatize Mere Christianity. I mean, it's a primer. It's an evangelistic primer. It's not a drama.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, what if we told the story behind the writing of Mere Christianity? So that period in Lewis's life between like 1939 and 1945, which, by the way, coincides with World War II, was an incredibly productive period in Lewis's life, even though he was surrounded by conflict. And because he wrote Screw Tape during that period, he wrote the broadcast talks, which became Mere Christianity. And so a lot of his writing, we said, oh, well, let's tell the story of how Mere Christianity was written and the context that it was written. And let's do that story in the drama, which we did. And then after we finished the drama, it seemed to make sense for me to take all the research I had done and put it into a book. And so there's a book that goes with the drama as a complement to it. So the book is nonfiction. It's not novelization of the drama. It's basically a nonfiction. This is Lewis's life during that period.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing about C.S. Lewis, especially in those two books, and I'm about halfway through Screwtape Letters. I just got it not that long ago.
Mm.
But one thing that book has done for me, it's changed the way I pray. Because, the way that he talks about trying to distract the person to just focusing on the words and this and that. So that book it's just changed the way, that I've prayed, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one thing about C.S. Lewis, and seems to be a theme in all his writing. You would know more so than me, but he wasn't afraid to tackle those type of topics, those subjects, to answer the hard questions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you're right. In fact, the word I would use for him in all of his writing is that he was unflinching.
Yeah.
He was unflinching. So whether it's Mere Christianity, his essays, any of the stuff that he wrote, he was never afraid to go near the things that people were reluctant to talk about, or that were uncomfortable to talk about. Yeah. He would go headlong into them in order to try to deal with the answers. So he wrote the book The Problem of Pain, and basically exploring suffering and our response to pain and suffering. And what is there a theology of pain and suffering that we could actually apply in even the worst situations? Mm-hmm. And he did it he was just always unflinching, because he had the amazing ability to work through the answer. So even the toughest questions, he could work through an answer that made sense. Mm-hmm. And even if you didn't agree with his answer, at least you had an understanding of a point of view that could answer it. So
and he could give you an answer.
That's part of his genius, really.
Yeah. C.S. Lewis means a lot to me also, because growing up, like I said, I grew up in a Christian home, and we didn't go to movie theaters or anything like that. I'm sure there was a lot of parents that didn't allow their kids to go to movie theaters growing up. But the first movie that our parents let us go see was in 2005 or 2006, whenever Chronicles of Narnia came out. So that was the first movie we saw in theaters, was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Yeah. Mm. So he means a lot to me. But is there any other authors that maybe you've thought about going into, like you did with C.S. Lewis?
Well, I mean, I've done a lot of biographical type stories. Mm-hmm. Been interested in G.K. Chesterton, who was an influence on Lewis. I mean, you can almost go backwards to some of the influences on Lewis and in other realms, creatively and otherwise, that were powerful and have meant a lot to me. So some of those focus on the families not actively producing radio theater productions right now, but I regularly meet with the guys, especially Dave Arnold, and he and I will rather in our wishful thinking world think, well, if they started doing radio theater again, what would we do? What would we like to do? So there are a lot of things, and I'm still producing for a different organization, but we've been doing we're about to record a drama on Joan of Arc. Mm-hmm.
We did Augustine.
Well, it's the Augustine Institute.
Augustine.
So I work with now, and we did Brother Francis, about Francis of Assisi. We did, of course, St. Patrick. We did St. Cecilia, who is a lesser known saint. And we're about to do Joan of Arc. And so there's a whole shopping list of biographical dramas that can be done with them. At various times, we had talked about doing, not at the Augustine Institute, but one that has come up from time to time is Pilgrim's Progress.
Ooh, but
we did an Odyssey episode that kind of spoofed that, but I don't know. There are a bunch that I think we have yet to do and could do if we could find a fresh, original way to come at it. Because we stay true to the source material, but we have to figure out how to make that work for audio and make it interesting for an audience now. But we've got a wish list of things we'd still like to do.
I would think it'd be more so a challenge now than ever with the social media, the way that it is nowadays, and the instant, YouTube and all these things now that kids are listening to. It's hard to get them to sit down and listen to a radio, show for any amount of time. So you really got to take them there You know what I mean? With
Yeah, but they do
the
usually
story.
once they get in. I mean, it's fascinating to me with Odyssey, of course, and then with radio. I mean, with, for example, our Chronicles of Narnia,
Which was really good.
we used a storyteller. And we don't call them narrators because they're not narrators. That's for nonfiction, but storytellers. And it's fascinating because when you think about it, most kids, I think most kids, are raised with people reading stories to them.
Yeah.
So using a narrator of any sort, a storyteller, if you listen to Odyssey or anything, we rarely ever did that because to me, it's sort of the last resort. What you really want, you don't want exposition. You want the dynamic of drama unfolding. And, but the further you get from our reality, the more you then have to rely on some other means to communicate things. How do you communicate the world of Narnia if you don't have a visual way to do it? And so what you have to have then is a compelling storyteller to help get us into the world. And kids are already there. On one hand, we think, oh, they're not going to want to sit still and listen to someone do that. And you want to try to get into the drama as fast as you can. But it's amazing to me that the storytelling aspect of kids' lives, because parents read to their kids, they have somebody in their lives that reads to them as younger children, they're already prepared in a sense for the experience, especially if it's a good story. If it's not a good story, no amount of sound effects or acting or storytelling by way of a narrator is going to do the job. If it's not a good story, as we used to say on Odyssey, we would call them swing set moments.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we've come up with a story idea that the kids will listen for about 5 minutes and then they'll be out on the swing set. They're not going to really listen anymore. So we always wanted to make sure that it held them and that they weren't like, oh, okay, forget that story. I'm going out and play. And that to me is the biggest challenge, I guess, is do it. And if you do it, then the kids will be there with you and the families will be, the parents too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I know for us, anytime we go on a long car ride on vacation or whatever, that's the time to get the Odysseys out. So then, I know whenever I was growing up, we would do the same thing and we would say, well, how long till we get there? And my mom or dad would say 3 Odysseys, or whatever like that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good way to break it down. So you're like, okay, I only got 2 more to go and then we're at grandma's house or wherever you're going.
Yep, exactly.
So, yeah. So did you have, I know it's probably like picking your kids, but did a episode of Odyssey like stick out to you? Maybe you had a favorite or something in the making of an episode?
Well, and that question has come up quite a bit over 30 years. And of course it shifts and changes.
Sure.
And the reason for it, you're right. It is like children because trying to choose an episode of 700, 800, 900 episodes. A lot of times it is the memory of the recording. It's the memory of factors beyond the show itself, things behind the scenes. Sometimes just other things that strike you when you're recording it or the response to it when it goes out. And suddenly this thing that you thought, well, this is a pretty good show, suddenly takes on a life of its own because it's impacted people in a way we never really expected it to. Yeah. And so there are a few, that immediately come to mind, like the Mortal Coil episodes, on definitely a personal level because of Al Smith comes to mind as favorites. Of the later things for me, as the writer director would be the Green Ring Conspiracy and the Ties That Bind series. Some of the series, I have great affection for. But it varies. You can kind of go through different periods of the show's life and then point to episodes. And then sometimes it's a matter of being reminded of episodes that I'd forgotten about. And then go, wait a minute. Oh, I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed that one.
Yeah, because it's not just Odyssey. You're also working on other projects and things like that. So it can be
tons,
easy so it could be easy to forget. Yeah.
I hate to admit it, but the truth is once we have what we call playback in the studio where we listen to the final version of a show before it goes out, that is often the last time I hear a show. Because I've moved on to the next show. Yeah. And I've moved on to the next project. And when my kids were younger, they listened to Odyssey in the car, and then I'd be in the car with them, and I would hear certain shows that I hadn't heard in years.
Yeah.
And then trying to remember, and sometimes even trying to remember, did I actually write that?
Yeah.
Sometimes it was hard for me to remember which one of us wrote the show. But that sort of thing, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've sat down and listened to episodes.
I've heard it kind of described before as taking it to, like you said, with the car, you're looking at it, looking at what's ahead through the windshield, but then you look back every once in a while, but you got the tiny little mirrors looking back at what was, you know what I mean, what you've done in the past. But I asked Katie Lee the same question. Did she have a favorite episode? And I told her, I said, my specific favorite one was The Secret Weapon. Do you remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I asked her, and she said, I don't remember that one. I'll have to go back and listen to it. She said, was I in it? I said, you were the coach. Were you? She said, oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah. No, I think, as I recall, whenever she would answer that question,
she did give an answer.
Well, I'm going to guess that one of her favorites is when Connie gave Eugene driving lessons.
Bingo.
That would be the one I know that comes up most to mind because of the two characters.
Yeah.
And the Connie Eugene episodes, and I could list a bunch of those. That, I got tickled by just what they did in the studio with them, that kind of banter that they always had, and the banter between Eugene and Bernard.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. I always loved writing episodes for them because it was always so much fun.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever go on their I forget the name of it, their YouTube show?
Well, Katie's. Yes. In fact, just recently. When I was there in February, sadly for the memorial service for Will Ryan, I went over to see Katie and her husband, and we were hanging out, and we were talking and reminiscing and doing all that. And she said, "Oh, we should film this." And I kept telling her, "No, I don't think anybody cares. Who's going to care?" Well, we wound up doing 3 episodes worth material, and which I think now I never watch or listen to myself, so. But I think she posted those just in the last couple of weeks.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to check that out
somewhere.
Yeah. Did you break the guitar out and play a song on there?
No. Yes, on the If I could air guitar it, I think I can do a pretty good air guitar.
There you go.
But I don't have the rhythm for drumming at all.
Yeah,
the coordination for drumming is beyond my imagination.
My son, he acts like we were watching the Chosen. You ever watch the Chosen, the TV show?
Yeah.
And they had the Christmas special where they had all these various artists, and they had Phil Wickham on there playing the piano, and my son got up there acting like he was playing the piano, and so my wife said, well, maybe we should get him in piano lessons, but he is wild in the truest sense of the word, so I don't think he would have the patience to sit at the keys and learn how to play.
Yeah. Patience is the main thing.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing that even comes close for me would be learning to type. Yeah. And that was an opportunity at school. They were offering, when I was in junior high, they were offering a typing course.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard that they were doing this, and I thought, I'm sitting doing this all the time. Maybe it's time I should learn how to do it for real. And it is the one thing in my life of that kind of discipline where you really, really have to learn and practice it that I did, and I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
I do wish I'd learned piano, not drums or guitar. I wish I had learned piano.
Yeah, I didn't have the patience for anything, so I'm musically challenged right there with you.
Yeah.
Did you have a teacher or anything like that kind of pushed you that way, that maybe kind of inspired you to write, or was it just
I did. In fact, I was very fortunate. There were various people at my church that encouraged me in the writing. But I did have teachers at school, in elementary school, and a couple when I was in junior high and senior high, who just really did, because I would have to write essays or stories or whatever. And they would put notes on, or they would tell me, you need to pursue this.
Yeah.
And so they encouraged me in that direction. There were people who did. And it means a lot to me because I look back on that and, think how easy it would be for someone to be indifferent. And if you're teetering on, should I do this or not do this? Now, doing it as a career was still sort of I don't know, it almost seemed unfathomable to me that I could make a career as a writer. I think I always assumed that, to borrow from the Apostle Paul, that I would have that and I would be doing that, but I'd have to have my tent making. Right. Which, by the way, I always encourage anybody who wants to get into the arts to always have that second fallback thing that they can do, whether it is, I don't know, whether for me it was like copywriting, because it was still writing, but it was sort of commercial writing. Mm-hmm. But for other people, whether it's working at a restaurant or construction, whatever it is that'll pay the bills while you're pursuing this other dream, this other desire.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, I'm going to write whether I get paid for it or not. I just would like to get paid for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess you really can speak to that. The fact that how you said earlier that even when you guys were writing Odyssey, you're okay, what's next?
Oh,
so
yeah.
Always trying to figure out what that next move is. But...
And it's not, and it's so funny because most of the writers I know, mm-hmm. all writers would love to make a living as a writer.
Sure.
Love for someone to pay them, especially to write the kinds of things that they just want to write. But it's interesting. And I think the other writers for Odyssey, we were all of one mind in terms of the passion to do it, the reason for doing it. We have all been driven by this desire to figure out how to communicate Christ, the love of Jesus, the Christian life, how to communicate that in a way that would be meaningful mm-hmm. for whoever is either reading or listening or watching or whatever the case may be, and to do it in a credible way. Radio theater was our internal motto for that, and I think it was true for Odyssey, mm-hmm. that we wanted to tell secular worthy stories from a Christian worldview.
Yeah,
and secular worthy for us meant quality. It mm-hmm. meant we should be good enough to compete, not that we were trying to, but good enough on a level of storytelling and sound production and acting and all of those components that if you're going to find fault with us, it's not going to be because of how we executed the work we were doing. Yeah. And I think the rest of the guys, not only did we feel the same in terms of a mission and our desire to do that, but then to also follow other opportunities, not because they paid well or whatever, but because it was a new learning experience. It was a new way to try to figure out how can I communicate love and grace and mercy in a meaningful way through story, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that you guys did really well, because you see a lot of Christian media now, whatever it may be, music, radio, television, whatever. Most of it is so cheesy that even if you hear about it, you're like, I know I'm a Christian, and I know this is something like even The Chosen. When I first heard about it, I was like, I don't know if that's something I want to give time to because it is so cheesy. But then you guys were able to make something entertaining. You're able to listen to.
The interesting thing is The Chosen and Dallas Jenkins, the main driver behind that, was a huge Odyssey fan.
Oh yeah,
I've met him.
Have you spoken with him?
Oh yeah, on several occasions, and he made it very clear that a big part of his being a filmmaker was because of Odyssey.
Oh wow!
And which means a lot to me. The idea that we created a show that could influence the next generation, maybe the generation after. And so what I love about Dallas is in watching The Chosen, for example, they made choices. Ironically, I think it was the movie The Passion, that was a game changer. So Mel Gibson basically said, I'm not trying to do a literal rendering of the gospel narrative. Because anytime you're adapting something, you're trying to do it in a way that captures the spirit of it. So whether I'm doing Narnia, mm-hmm. whether you're doing anything, anytime you're adapting Lord of the Rings or whatever, you have to make different choices because you're not on the page. You are moving into a visual realm or whatever. And the rule was You want to be true to the spirit of the source material, and be as true to the source material as you can be. But you are going to have to make certain artistic choices. So for years, one of the reasons why I'm opinionating here too much, but I think one of the reasons we call it cheesy was because the people who were creating these things got so lost in their good intention of trying to stay true word for word to the gospel, or true word for word to something, that what they wound up creating didn't really work for the visual realm or whatever. Or they got so enamored by the evangelistic opportunity that they forgot basic rules of artistic creation in terms of story, conflict, character, all of those basic things. When I write all of these biodramas, like of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, of William Wilberforce, of the various saints, I still have to approach them as characters. And so in approaching them, I have to ask, what are they trying to do? What's their motivation? What are they doing and why? And to figure that out so it makes sense to the listener or the viewer. And I think the passion changed that. Mel Gibson moved away from a literal telling and went for a more artistic approach.
Yeah.
It was still true to the spirit of Christ and still true to the spirit of the Gospels, but not literal. And I think what happened then is it opened the door for Dallas Jenkins to be able to do that with The Chosen, to stay orthodox in terms of its core message, let's call it message, if not message, but I mean the essence of what it is. He stayed true to the spirit of it, but allowed himself to take some artistic liberties and dramatic license to make it more compelling, so we could get into the characters more. And get into the reality of the time. And I'll tell you, he and the team did, I've written a lot of biblical stuff myself, and their research, I think, has been impeccable in a lot of ways. They really do capture things from the time and just slipped it in, didn't focus on it. They just sort of slipped it in as an, oh, by the way. And that's why I think they avoided the cheese factor. I mean, you may not agree with all of their choices and may not enjoy everything, but I think of the creative efforts to tell the story of Jesus, it's certainly one of the best in the past decade or two, if not more. But
I think they're definitely spot on. That's one thing too. You see at the very first, because I've rewatched the first two seasons countless times already, waiting for season 3 to come out. But that's one thing that it says at the beginning of the first episode. It's basically what you just said, and how they encourage the readers to read the Bible for themselves. And I think that's one thing that their show has done, is it's made people go to the Bible more, you know what I mean? And get into the scripture for themselves and just get a deeper relationship with Christ. And that's ultimately the goal, So.
And I think that's a big part of it. And I understand the evangelistic heart that has gone behind. I mean, that's informed so much of, let's call it, Christian drama and a lot of the stuff that's been done. And really, it's a good exercise. If any of your viewers are writers or artists, sometimes rather than flinch and go, oh, that's just so cheesy, for me, it's a good exercise to sit down and say, well, why do I think so? What choices did they make that I think may have been misguided, that derailed what they were trying to do, or may have lost secular credibility, if I can call it that? What is it that went wrong in certain areas? And that, to me, is a fascinating discussion to have. So often I will make it a point to see or experience certain things, even though a lot of friends are going, oh, no, this is bad. You don't want to go near this. But I'm going, no, because it doesn't seem to be working. I know that it would be very easy for me to make similar mistakes. So I want to see what mistakes they made and figure out how or why they made them.
Yeah. Well, I think they've been spot on so far. But I don't want to take too much more of your time. Do you have any? So I'm assuming you're a big reader.
I wish I were a bigger reader. I just find that I'm spending so much time writing that sitting down to relax and looking at words on a page actually is hard to do.
Yeah.
But no, I do still read. I mean, yeah,
You got a couple behind you
I've
there.
got a lot of books.
You got a couple. Is there a book that I'll just rephrase it. Has there been a book recently that stood out to you the most? Maybe you've gotten something out of?
Well, it's so funny. I seem to be bouncing around in so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll read something that's devotional, and hopefully looking for new insights about scripture, about different aspects of the Christian life. I stumble into certain periods of history for reasons I'm not even sure of. It's not even like it's related to anything I'm working on. Mm-hmm. But right now, I've been reading a book that's about primarily about Berlin, but Germany in between World War I and the rise of Hitler.
Yeah,
and it's a well written book and compelling in the writing to capture what happened and how does somebody like Hitler come along and actually get elected. I mean, what was going on that he came and he addressed and dealt with. And I'm not reading it for any particular reason because, like I said, I'm not working on anything like that. But the book was interesting enough to me that I've been reading that lately. So I do bounce around quite a bit. There's some I don't agree with his worldview, of course.
Yeah.
But the writing of like Neil Gaiman, I think, is a remarkable writer and storyteller, even though morally, I mean, he doesn't come from a Christian point of view at all.
Yeah.
But I do find his writing to be very compelling. And again, it's a case of I don't agree with him, but I want to look at how he does what he does and how he does it so well.
Yeah.
And then hopefully helps me become a better writer.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the goal right there. Take what works for somebody else, even though you don't agree with them, and you can learn something from
And by the way,
sure.
and more often than not, when I've read something or seen something, if I were to say this Adventures in Odyssey episode is directly related to the fact that I read this book, you might look at the book and look at the episode and go, I don't even know what the connection is. I don't understand how you connected. But for me, there was something that by the time I wrote whatever, it was filtered through my sensibility. And by the time I did it, it may not be recognizable as anything because I don't ever intentionally or even unintentionally plagiarize anybody. And generally, by the time it gets filtered through my sensibilities, you wouldn't recognize it. You wouldn't recognize the source material anyway. So
Well, I think at this point, with all the books that have been written, all the things that have been said, we're all plagiarizing somebody.
Well, inevitably. I mean, there are very few new ideas. And C.S. Lewis also argued that this quest for originality undoes a lot of writers. Because rather than just tell a good story, they're trying to figure out how to be really clever. And sometimes good stories are undone because the writer is trying to be too clever about it. And rather than just tell your story, first tell your story and use your voice for it. But sometimes, and we see it a lot with movies and TV shows that can become lost in their own cleverness and then they don't understand why the audience doesn't stay with it. Well, it's because they weren't telling a good story. But that's important.
Simple as that. Yeah. Well, I just thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on and spending a little bit of time with us today.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
I just want to say, I know me personally, like I said already, I grew up listening to the show, and I know there was so many other people with the same stories. That doesn't make me unique, but it makes me blessed to be in that position to grow up listening to, the Adventures in Odysseys, the Chronicles of Narnia. So I just want to personally tell you, thank you for filling that role where it needed to be, where that role needed to be filled, and stepping in you and the other people that worked on Odyssey and giving us something that we could listen to that was enjoyable.
Yeah, well, that's very kind. Thank you. It was my pleasure to be part of it. So even as you say that, I'm thinking I'm like with the biggest fans in just being glad it was there to do. Yeah. So I'm glad I got to be part of that.
Yeah. Well, do you have any final words of encouragement, maybe a favorite Bible verse or anything like that you want to leave us with?
A specific, there are a lot of Bible verses that could come to mind, especially now, but I think I just keep going back to, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. And that's always been a favorite, John 8:32. And part of that is at a time when we need truth and we need proclaimers of truth. And
Absolutely.
we'll be unflinching about it. That stays in my mind that we need storytellers. We need people who will intelligently and meaningfully articulate our faith, not defensively and not to proselytize, by the way. Because as soon as we are actively trying to proselytize to force people to our position or to try to persuade them, rather than just engage in a conversation or use art as a means for discussion, I think that's what undoes us.
Yeah.
And so, I think if there's a final word of encouragement, it is love the Lord with all our hearts, souls, minds, and bodies, and serve him. Serve
Amen.
him because we need servants.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, couldn't have said it any better myself. Like I said, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Sure.
Hope
pleasure.
you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, I'm very appreciative of your time. Hopefully you guys have a great week. We'll see you next time. God bless.